Hello, welcome to the AppleInsider Podcast. I'm William Gallagher. Our sponsors this week are Oracle and Masterclass, and I'm joined by Wes Hilliard. But first, as we record this, the fires in California, they are terrifying. A friend who was just evacuated there tells me that his house is okay so far, but the place is right next door where he just shops and sometimes walks. They've been hit terribly hard, and it's just, I don't know how it's going to end. If you're in the area, especially, you know that we're thinking of you and hope that you're safe. And hopefully for everybody, it'll be sorted out soon. But now, Wes, total change of subject, move away from that. Actually, a change of subject mostly because I want to cleverly set up this week's AppleInsider Plus. The AppleInsider Plus being the extra topic in our extended ad-free version of the podcast for subscribers. But in order to cleverly set this up, let me ask you this. Wes Hilliard, did you turn up today because the podcast is on your to-do list or because it's in your calendar?
I actually don't have it anywhere, to be fair. I just know it's when we record and show up. This is probably the one thing I don't have in my schedule. I probably should add it now that you've reminded me.
Okay. Right. I had an idea for whichever way you were going to say to do. Okay, I had a clever remark, and it's totally ruined now. Anyway, AppleInsider Plus will be about calendars and things, and partly because it's a new year, but partly actually, very selfishly, my Fantastical subscription is like a 1 pixel away from coming up, and I just can't decide whether to carry on with it or not. So, it isn't just about me. It's calendars, what we use when we use them, and what we use them for, especially now that these days apps are kind of blurring together. Things like Notion, for example, incorporate calendars into that, where you might not have expected, and basically a note-taking app to do. Oh, and Apple itself has, didn't they recently add reminders to Apple calendars? Right. And this week, as it happens, there's also word of Apple doing something else with calendars. But let's let's go with the flow here and schedule that for later. Because first, this is CES week. And, for the longest time, right, years and years, I've been such a cynic about the Consumer Electronics Show because I know it's only me, but it has seemed to me over the years that most things that get announced at CES never actually ship. But, this year and last, I'm starting to change my mind a bit. So, Wes, let's not delve terribly far into CES, but how about CES in one line? What do you say? Good, bad, yes, no, go.
I think this is kind of a boring year, honestly. It's there's some interesting stuff. A lot of robot vacuums. There's a robot that'll move your laundry out of the way because it has an arm that can reach out and grab things. But there's a helicopter that'll take outside of your car if you want to have a little vertibird lift from your vehicle. So that's, flying cars. We can do that. I don't know. There's some robots that'll just follow you around and tell you the things that your phone could tell you if you just look down at it. So there's the usual silliness. There's the usual, fun stuff. You can put yourself in a holographic frame and put it in your friend's house so they can never get rid of you, and you're just a 3D hologram standing in the room, I guess, creepily watching them. But yeah, wow. the usual CES stuff, I guess.
So I think basically the word I'm looking for is anyway. Moving on from CES then. I am just deeply concerned this week, about Siri. Because this business that Apple has come forth and made lots of claims about Siri privacy. Why are they saying that now? What's gone on? What's happening? What are they doing to me?
Wednesday evening is kind of funny. We got a little newsroom post from Apple, which seemingly came from nowhere. But it was actually in response to a class action lawsuit that they had settled earlier in the week. And because of this, Apple wanted to come out and say, hey, Siri is private. It is currently listening to what I'm saying right now because I can see the bubble in my Vision Pro. Go away. We're not talking to you. Nope. Okay, got rid of it. So, yes, Siri is private, and it is actually not collecting your data, and Apple is not using that data that it does have to advertise to you. The only thing it actually does is if you opt in, you can submit voice recordings to Apple occasionally for them to verify that what you said is being done correctly, and that is done anonymously. They don't know who said this thing, and unless you're constantly reciting your name and social security number to the assistant, I don't think there's any way to trace that back to you. So,
I've had this thing. I've just put a HomePod Mini next to my TV set, and fine. But a couple of times this week, I have been holding my phone, and I have asked. Let's call it Iris, just in case anything happens. I have asked Iris a very simple question, or asked it to turn on a certain light. And although the phone has reacted, and it's given me the whole nice new Siri animation, the HomePod Mini, way across the room, has responded. And actually it said, I can't help you. I said, but what? So I'm having trouble with Siri, but I didn't think at any point that trouble meant it was listening in on me and profiting from all of this. So...
Well, I went on a bit of a tirade here because we keep hearing people who say, my phone's listening to me, it knows what I'm saying, I had a private conversation with someone and then I saw an ad for that conversation. Sure. It's so inefficient. Just starting from the top, a few years ago, I want to say 2018, 2019, there was these contractors that Apple had, I guess, I don't know, severed or something, but they'd come out and said that they had listened to thousands of recordings and sometimes heard intimate moments or people saying private information or talking about things, not even seemingly talking to the assistant. It was just recordings that had been shared through this submission system. And this was kind of were taken by surprise and thought Apple was listening to them without their permission, and when in fact it was just accidental triggers or on-purpose triggers, and the voice data was being collected and used, again, by the contractors to make it better. And at the time, it was opt-out, and now it is opt-in, but you've always been able, Apple has, since the day it came out on the iPhone 4S, I want to say like more than a decade ago anyway, it is... always been the option to say, don't use my analytics for improving Siri. That's always been the case. So here we are, fast forward to this contractor coming out saying, hey, this is actually what we're doing, and it's kind of creepy, right? And I guess a group of people really took that to heart, kind of freaked out and said, well, I use Apple's Assistant all the time, and then I opened a website and saw advertising for Air Jordans. And I had just talked about that with the assistant in the room. Apple's using my data to create an advertising profile and sell it to companies so they can show me ads just the way Google does. And it's just... So they went out, created a class action lawsuit, gathered enough people who thought the same thing. The judge threw it out. There was no basis for it. It was ridiculous. Apple just... The technology, that's just not how it works. The data they have on hand, it's just not used for that. And the data they do have is anonymized. So there's just no proof of this happening whatsoever. But they had the ability to try again. They could appeal. They appealed. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it wasn't the same judge. I think maybe a jury. I can't remember exactly how this happened. But it got around enough that Apple was just like, fine, we're just going to settle. This is ridiculous. And they even said in the settlement, we are not saying that we did this, but we just want this court proceeding to end. And honestly, the money they had to pay out was pennies for Apple. And now that's over. And a few days later, they came out with the statement to remind everyone their assistant is perfectly private and there's no reason to fear that they're using their information for advertising. It's just not something they do. And I want to get into why in a second. So what do you think of all that?
I think you're quite kind saying that people took it to heart. I am wondering if saw an opportunity for cash may have been more of a proviso. I mean, I don't know. It's very easy to believe conspiracy theories and things. And if somebody's coming to you with, we're trying to get lawyers together, you might also, give them some credence that maybe they don't. So I don't know. But the cynic in me goes,
This is where we cleverly put the Star Spangled Banner in the background while we're speaking about this, because the way of America, the United States, as anyone in the country we're out of knows, is sue, 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 right? That is what you do, and you get your money, and the lawyers get their money. That's why we have too many lawyers in this country. It's because we grew up getting told, be a lawyer, and then everyone went to be these case lawyers that handle lawsuits and make a bunch of money from it, and we get $20 out of the deal. So, yeah, go take advantage of that class action. But here's why this is absurd. It's not just, Apple fanboys saying Apple doesn't do anything bad. It's actually just wrong. First of all, it is the most inefficient way to gather massive amounts of data about a populace is by listening to what they say. Right.
Sorry, that sounds like a commentary on elections or something. But okay, to your point, technically, the volume of data for the amount of information, I hadn't thought of that, but that makes sense. Yeah. Now you've said it. Okay.
So you're telling me that we're going to get these random snippets of data, and maybe someone might mention shoes, and we can advertise. It's just impossibly bad. It's poor. We would waste so much money. Apple would not be the company they are if that's what they did. And they don't make money off of this stuff. They do have advertising branch that does Apple News, but that Apple News ads are just awful, and they probably make a quarter off of them. I don't know why they do it, but this is not that. And there's so much more. People, I think it's because it's something they can understand. I don't want, it's 1984. I don't want a camera or a microphone in every room of my home listening to me so that when I say something bad, the police come and arrest me, right? Like it's very dystopian, very Orwellian. And so our fear automatically goes to, well, all these microphones, they're obviously listening to us. We wrote about this in science fiction. They're listening to us to do their job, and that's the extent of it. And Apple has proven through their white papers and technology and people who know what they're doing, taking them apart, it's just not how it works. So the reality, though, is so much worse. If you thought you were upset at the idea that someone could be collecting your voice data and listening to your private moments, what companies are actually doing is they might as well have a camera pointed at you at the toilet in your bathroom. Like that is it's even worse. Like the invasion of privacy that these companies out there, not Apple, are willing to go through to get every inkling of data on a person is such a terrible invasion that is what you should be angry at. But these little distractions that are easier to understand are what people chase.
But hang on. Apart from the fact that I was enjoying all of this and it took a horrible turn at the end there, if it's not efficient for Apple to pass our conversations, how is it easier or better for less scrupulous rivals?
So rivals are not listening to what we say, period. They don't have the access to it on our phones, and even if they did, it would be a waste of time. So what they're actually doing is, we could do a whole podcast on this. We've discussed it before, but let me give you an example. You're driving to work, and you've allowed Facebook access to your location, so it knows what route you take every day. You stop at the gas station, and you you fill up your car with gas, and now they know that you bought unleaded gas, and you're driving a car with an unleaded tank, and now you're going to get advertisements for more premium vehicles or an electric car. But then you go in and you buy sugar-free gum and a diet soda, and now maybe they have figured out that you are worried about your weight or your sugar intake, and they're going to use that data to try and talk to you. But also, how did they know that? Well, it's because your credit card companies, when you swipe your card, track all of that information and actually sell it in aggregate to these advertising companies as well. And these advertising companies, which include Google, Meta, and Amazon, buy this data, pair it up with the other pieces of data that they have about you, and create a huge profile on every living human, basically, and tie it to your IP address, tie it to your devices, and then that way, that's how they know when you're scrolling Instagram and you dwell a little bit too long on those shoes, that the next time that you open YouTube, you're going to get an advertisement for those shoes. It is disgusting the level at which these companies go to show you an ad for toothpaste, and I hate it.
But I think even in your own argument there's kind of the seeds of hope, because you specifically mentioned Instagram and Facebook, and they're the people we can trust, aren't they?
No.
No?
No. Awful. We're not even going to get into what happened to them this week. It's just a travesty. Yeah. But focusing more on what you can do as the individual, because I just wanted this little PSA here at the end of this conversation. I'll let you say something if you want. But if there's something that you can do about this, it's use Apple. Look at what Apple has done over the last decade for privacy and the reaction from these companies that I mentioned, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Meta, how they react every time Apple does something. It is a real impact. App tracking transparency, I bet you haven't heard that in a while. It's taken for granted now. And that keeps Apple randomly refreshes your IP address. You also get there's just so many little protection across the operating system on top of now iCloud Private Relay, right? That helps keep your information from being gathered so easily. You can also use different profiles in Safari so that you're a different human being to these trackers depending on which profile you're in. And you can aggregate it even further by using Apple Pay, because the credit card companies can no longer track what you're buying when you use Apple Pay, because you're using a randomized credit card number every single time. It's incredible, every little thing that they've done. And other companies are doing this too, just to a lesser extent. And Apple is definitely parading it around it as a marketing thing, but it is also real, right? Apple doesn't care about us as the individual. It is a multi-trillion-dollar company.
Yeah.
But the people at the top believe in this. They believe privacy is a fundamental human right, and I think that's why it's so good that they're doing all of these things, because other companies just don't care. They want all of your data, and they will sprinkle some privacy language on top and actually suck all your data in, which is why we have problems like what's happening in Brazil.
So, not to ignore Brazil, but clearly this is a week for me thinking about me. Breaking this down, because I predominantly use Apple, I get fewer adverts for clothes and things. Does that mean Apple is actually responsible for how badly I dress?
It is kind of funny. I consistently get the ads I do see, because I do use content blocking on certain websites that abuse advertising and stuff like that. Like I don't like blanket ad blocks, because the internet works. You have to earn money somehow, right? Yeah. So, but when I do see an ad, it has no idea who I am. I especially like in Apple News, or if I'm going to, I don't know, a website that I just happen to have that turned off on. If I get a Google placement ad, it's usually for trucks. A lot of times bras. I get a lot of bra ads when I see them. They have no idea who I am, and I love that, because I have taken the time to ensure that their business model, their disgusting use of my data is as minimized as possible. There's no getting away. If you're a citizen on the internet, there's no getting away from it. But you can definitely minimize your footprint. And I recommend, as we get into the new year and get towards, spring cleaning and all of that, people think about that, because minimizing your footprint is actually a good idea, because you never know what else that data could be used for. And you want to have as little of it available as possible, just for your own sake.
So, just to end this, you're willing to put time and effort into this, but you've now had at least a minute in which you could have said, actually, William, you look smart, and you just ignored that. So, fine. This episode is brought to you by Oracle. Even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database application development, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking, so you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI. It's for new US customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/AppleInsider15. That's oracle.com/AppleInsider digits 15. And thanks to Oracle for supporting the Apple Insider podcast. There's something else I particularly wanted to ask you about because you wrote about this for Apple Insider, and I'm interested in the rumours about devices. Aren't we always interested in rumours about devices? The iPhone SE 4, or the iPhone 16e, or whatever it's called, might be coming quite soon, and so might the next iPad, except they might not. Where do we stand on this? Should I get excited or not?
It's not going to be the iPhone 16e. It just does. That name just does not make sense. So they're going to come out with an SE every year now. Or they're going to wait 4 years and then people are going to be buying an iPhone 16e in 2029. It doesn't work. So I just don't see that happening. It'll be called the iPhone SE parentheses 4th generation, and we'll shorthand it to iPhone SE 4 as we always do. There's a rumor. Well, kind of. This is one of those weird things. Apple let a little code leak in betas. Someone discovered it, and it shows that Apple is working on their products, obviously. The iPad 11, the iPad Airs, these rumored products are showing up more and more in the code. Clearly, they're getting ready for the release, and it appears that iOS 18.3, iPadOS 18.3 is going to be the shipping operating system for these new devices. So I think someone just jumped to conclusions. They said, oh, wow, 18.3 could come out as soon as January, early February. They could release it at the same time. That is not the case. So, and we got a clarification from Mark Gurman, who has a little bit stronger resources beyond a hunch, and said, no, it's not going to happen, but they will launch before iOS 18.4, which is due before June, probably around May. So now we have a tighter window of probably early April for the new products.
When the iPhone SE 4 comes, we believe it'll look like the iPhone 14 was. We are, I don't know if Apple hasn't said anything at all, but we are reasonably certain that it will support Apple Intelligence, because it'd be weird if it didn't. Doesn't that mean the iPhone SE 4, which is always the cheapest phone, is actually going to be cheaper and better than, say, the iPhone 15 that Apple is continuing to sell?
So the iPhone SE is going to be an excellent value, and I dare say people should buy it over the iPhone 15 sight unseen. There's going to be some things missing. You're not going to have certain things like the second camera, but that's not important to most people. I believe the iPhone 15 also has a dynamic island, so there's just tiny little things different across these. And iPhone 15 is last year's model anyway, and most people buying that model will probably buy on the used market anyway. So I don't know how many new iPhone 15s Apple is selling beyond less economically profitable countries or something like that. But looking at the SE, though, there's a reason why, not beyond just, speculation and, oh, well, it's going to come in April. Well, there's actually more of a hard line of there's no way Apple would release these products in January. And could you guess why?
They're terrified of competition from the CES. No?
Yes. There was a lot of phones announced at CES, and I couldn't tell you a single name of a single one because they were all horrid. But
I was kidding. I actually didn't know any phones at all. I'd missed that. But okay, so not that. Samsung sometimes comes out with its phones around now, I think. Am I wondering about
if
that?
If there has ever been a truer thing in the world, it's truest today. Apple does not make decisions based on what Samsung's doing and never has. I always love those conspiracy theories. Yeah. But even better, though, flip it. Apple has always influenced how Samsung does business. So just however you want to take that. In any case...
No, I've got to say, actually, this is an important point here. I don't think Apple has any influence on any other company's Dell product names at all. Really?
Oh, of course not.
No,
Never.
None. None.
Definitely not.
If you haven't heard the story of Dell and its product names, yeah, you've missed a laugh, but that's about all. But sorry, you were saying, okay, I'm keen to know. January, no iPhone. Everybody's on holiday at Apple?
Yeah.
No.
You've got a Dell Pro Max.
Yeah, you're right. It's irresistible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you like to say it and I'll giggle? How's that?
No. January doesn't work because, especially this year, let's remove iPads from the discussion, but they are actually equal. This works for all three products that we're expecting. iPhone SE is going to use the A18 processor, and that is currently being used in the iPhone 16. We just got out of Apple's largest quarter of the year, and the iPhone 16 sells pretty much blockbuster all the way through to this early spring, all the way through Valentine's Day. It is a huge gift-giving season, basically from release to Valentine's Day or so. Apple cannot keep enough of them on the shelf, and the market for those chips are already fully saturated by the iPhone 16 lineup. And then you're going to tell me that in the middle of January, Apple's just going to be like, okay, TSMC, we need, I don't know, twice as many A18 chips for a new product launching. No, it's just the supply chain is not built that way. It's not efficient to divest from the more premium, more expensive device line that people are still buying in droves. So just does not make sense financially, doesn't make sense for the supply chain, and it doesn't make sense for people. No, generally speaking, the way we're kind of dealing with a technology that we invented 20 years ago called the subsidy. Basically, people would have 2-year contracts that would either end in the fall or the spring, because that's when smartphones released more prominently back in the day, and they've spread out over the years since. But Apple's stuck to that, and people bought the new phone in the fall or the spring, and they would renew their phone in the fall or spring because of how their contracts worked. And now today, we're not really dealing with contracts and subsidies anymore, but that upgrade cycle has stuck. So Apple would not release a phone outside of its built-in upgrade cycle, which, if you look at the iPhone SE, it is always released in March or April, which is where the upgrade cycle sticks. So human behavior, supply chain, financial, there's just a million reasons why this doesn't work. And instead, Apple will wait until the iPhone 16 demand gets to its absolute peak and drop off, and then throw the SE out there for everyone else who wants a less expensive option.
So, okay, because this fits in with something else I've wondered that I should really have researched before I ask you this, but it sounds like the iPhone SE comes in pretty much halfway between 1 year's iPhone lineup and the next. Ish, almost like 6 months in. But for several years, and I cannot remember if Apple did it last year, they've also done a new colour of the latest iPhone for, the shocking greens and the purples and stuff. Doesn't that conflict with an SE? Or
I believe
we're less likely to get one.
I believe we didn't get a color last year. We got a color 2 years ago. It was yellow, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
But we did not get one last year, and Apple does not always have to do a color. And even if they do, it is to encourage the holdouts that were waiting for the 16 to go ahead and get it, because they were in that price range already. And maybe they were saying, I'll wait for 17. Ooh, this shiny new color. But the iPhone SE is still a different market, and the SE isn't going to convince someone who is waiting on a better phone to go to a lesser phone. Some people will do that. There will be people right on that divide that will aim lower, but a lot of people who are in the 16 lineup aren't going to suddenly say, I want an SE. Like if they have an iPhone SE, they're going to probably get the next iPhone SE. But if they have an iPhone 15 or an iPhone 14, there's probably very little chance or reason for them to actually get an SE if it releases in 25. So that's the market Apple would be aiming for if they came out with a new color. It would be the people who still have an iPhone 14 who still haven't upgraded to the 16, but now there's a new color, and it might be your favorite color. You'll go buy it, but you're not going to go from a 14 to an SE. That wouldn't make any sense.
I remember thinking when we did get colors, it was like a mid-cycle refresh. It was the only difference, but it kind of put the phones back in everybody's minds or something, as much as actually offering anything new. I'm trying to. I feel like I've been so keen to ask you certain things, and we've kind of touched on other topics that we then just abandoned, like the Dell nonsense. So we can do that in a sentence, can't we? Dell has got rid of all of its ridiculous product names and replaced them with ridiculous product names that start off being identical to Apple's, but that's not quite ridiculous enough. So they've just made them stupider. They've clarified and then they have declarified things. We'll put a link in the show notes to that because it's worth a glance, but it isn't worth anything. Although I quite like the fact that during the press launch itself, they were criticised to their face about doing this and were not very confident in their response. The other thing that I thought we skipped on, but again, no more about me, is we did say about Brazil and what was going on. And this touches into some stuff we started with on Siri and privacy for it. But I know it's the FaceApp app, but I don't know what it did and why Apple's in trouble for it in Brazil. But you do, don't you?
Well, FaceApp is a known entity. It's been around for a while. It's very popular because I don't think people take it too seriously. Its presentation is you can make your photos, make it look like you were at a model photo shoot. And it's like transforming these dreadfully exhausted looking women into supermodels covered in contouring makeup, right? It's just this almost honestly, they're just different people. I don't even think like it. Their platform is built around basically turning you into someone that you're not. Some people enjoy this. I have seen on like Facebook people posting these perfect versions of themselves that don't look anything like them, and this is probably where it's coming from. But most people use it for entertainment because you can make yourself look old, you can make yourself look like a baby, gender swap, and there's even a very controversial I hate even saying it out loud, a race swap, I guess, feature. Wow. So yeah, just it's a very stupid app, but sometimes you need stupid. I don't know. People enjoy the I guess the value of just silliness that it can offer. Whatever. I'm not a user of the app. I wouldn't be even if it didn't introduce this horrifically privacy nightmare nonsense. But we knew as early as I believe 2019 that this app was bad news, because we got to look at the privacy policy, and it starts off saying, you as the user are, of course, the owner of anything you upload to our platform. You don't need to worry. We're not going to, this. You are the owner. But also, by consenting, that's usually where people start reading. And then you say, by consenting to our terms of service, you are also providing these rights to our company to use the app. And then like 6 lines down, it's like, and we get infinite perpetuity of ownership over everything that you've ever uploaded to this that you also get to own, but don't worry, we own it too. And because of this contract, we can basically annul your ownership and use it in your photos in advertising or sell them to people if we want to. And it's just basically they encourage you to upload your entire photo library to their service by and this is one of those reasons why now you can limit access to your photo library to 1 or 2 photos for an app rather than just giving it to them whole hog, because apps like this would just suck up everything and then do horrifically weird things with them, whatever they were doing, training their models, selling them for advertising campaigns. I don't know, but just privacy nightmare. And then, fast forward a few years, and it seems Brazil has caught wind of the fact that this is horrific but they're mad at it for a different reason, and I think it's funny. Their terms of service is in English, and they speak Portuguese, and their users cannot read the terms of service, therefore they don't even know what they're agreeing to, and they're using the app not even knowing that their privacy rights are being violated, therefore they never consented to their data being taken, and Brazil saying this judge is saying this is a violation of law. They have very strict privacy laws in Brazil, and Apple and Google, because they distribute the app, knowingly perpetrated this onto their people, and it is their fault. Therefore, they are getting the fine of a very measly, I think, $3 million. So, That's
Okay.
the story. So what do you think?
Wow.
Is Apple and Google at fault for not ensuring that this already horrific terms of service was not readable in other languages?
Are they accessories after the fact? I need to point out I had never heard of this app until this happened, and I may never hear of it again. So perhaps I'm not the most informed here, but surely it had to go through what we used to call the nutrition label stuff. It must have fessed up to Apple's review team what it was doing, or did Apple not check? Is there a question, actually? What language do you use? I hadn't thought of that.
Basically, the nutrition labels. To be clear, the problem isn't that they didn't disclose what they were doing. Basically, it does have a nutrition label. It's purchases, search history, identifiers, usage data, and diagnostics. And it says data not linked to you, which sure, whatever. But if you read the terms of service, it's basically like if you upload a photo to our service, we own it forever. But in any case, that's not the issue. Apple and Google, I don't know where they said this because this was translated from a website, so I don't have the exact details. But I believe this was in response to the not to the publication, but maybe in response to Brazil. Anyway, Google and Apple's response is basically the app passes all the check marks. It is lawful. It has its terms of service. It's running its business how it wants to, and how the customers interact with it is not our problem. It presents the terms of service. People agree to it. That's it. They're not violating anything that's outside of our control. If they were doing something illegal, it wouldn't be on our platforms in the first place. But the users are agreeing to the contract, and basically Brazil is saying, but you're allowing this to be on the App Store in Brazil without a Portuguese terms of service. So how were people actually consenting to it? So it's a back and forth. I'm sure there will be appeals. Who knows? It's $3 million. They'll probably just pay it. But I wonder what the result of this is going to be, because I think this is a bigger conversation than just FaceApp. If Brazil succeeds in bullying Apple and Google using an app that has a poorly presented terms of service or whatever, and is violating user privacy or whatever grounds they're going to attack Google and Apple for, through an app distributed through the App Store, I guarantee you, not just Brazil, but the rest of the world will take notice, and there will be more of these kinds of lawsuits based on app exists, Google, Apple distribute, they're at fault, they're getting fined. And this is just one of those doors that I think Apple and Google want to keep closed, so I'm sure they're going to appeal and push back.
Is it not reasonable to assume that an app store in a territory will have localized language for the apps and for the terms and conditions?
This is tough. So I'm not a lawyer, and I definitely, I don't even know how you would get into this globally, because Apple is a global business. Apps are distributed globally. Apple does require every App Store submission to be localized, so a lot of screenshots need to be localized if it's in. But that's the thing, though. I can go to a search engine, find a Japanese app that was made in Japan that is in Japanese, open it in my American App Store, and the listing is in Japanese, all the characters are in Japanese. I can hit get, download it, open it, and the entire app is Japanese, and use it. So
actually, you would want that, wouldn't you? If you're a Japanese user who happens to be in the States, that's what you would want. So I see your point. Yeah,
and you can change your language in the operating system to a different language too. Your device, just because you live in the United States, doesn't have to be in English. So this is where it's tricky. Apple and the rest of the world, I believe, doesn't really have any kind of enforcements to say your app has to be in English, because that's really weird. And to say, okay, you're a United States developer, you better go pay someone to translate your terms of service into 150 languages. It's untenable. So I think what Brazil is asking for here is none of Apple and Google's problem, and not even really they don't have much of a leg to stand on, as far as, because it's a weird precedent to set, to say your global marketplace has to appeal to every single language. And maybe this is one of those weird things where, and I know this is controversial and it'll probably get everything wrong anyway. This is where quote unquote AI, whatever, would be somewhat useful. If it gets good enough, it could just auto translate everything for you. And we're kind of getting there with, like, you know, Safari has translate inside of it. Maybe we'll get to the point where it just can automatically translate these things. And if you are an iPhone user in Brazil and open the terms of service, I do believe you can say, translate this page to Portuguese. It won't be a perfect translation, but even so, no one's actually reading these terms of service. I think the lawsuit misses the point, is most people just hit agree and move on. And the English reading people who look at this terms of service don't even know, even if they do look at it, that they're agreeing to give up all of their data, because it's so weirdly written in lawyer speak that they don't even know that they're doing this. So
Sorry, just speaking of things we don't know, I don't believe the developer of FaceApp has been fined, but I realise I don't even know who that developer is. Is there word of them being hunted down by Brazilian police in some way?
I mean, what's funny is I don't think they care about the developer, because they're not going to get any money from this developer. I'm sure the developer, whatever company owns this, they're owned by the company FaceApp Technology Limited. So great. I'm sure they're earning lots of money because they have in-app purchases and stuff, and probably collect all this data and sell it. So they probably have a lot, but it's not a lot by Google and Apple standards. Like a $3 million fine would actually probably ruin this company, and they would never pay it. They would go through all these litigations, and it would just be a waste of Brazil's time. That's why they're going to Apple and Google. The lawsuit isn't really about FaceApp. It's about, I guess, grandstanding this privacy law, which I'm glad it exists. America should have more privacy first laws for their citizens. But I think it sets a dangerous precedent of, you know, if you have to translate everything, like Apple already has so many like weird rules for getting something on the App Store. Imagine if this was the case. I couldn't believe it. Even Apple, the global force that it is, does not offer everything in every language, right?
Good
so
point. No, it doesn't.
And I want to make one last point on this one, because it's kind of a funny thing. Remember a couple of weeks ago when we discussed Brazil about a different case? The Brazilian regulator, CADE, wants Apple to allow sideloading.
Oh, yes. And,
so if Apple enables sideloading, then Brazil couldn't sue them for FaceApp, because then people could just sideload FaceApp because it would no longer be in control of the app. You see what I'm saying here? Like,
I do, yes.
I don't know what they're doing.
This episode is brought to you by Masterclass, which I now have on my Apple TV 4K, as well as my iPhone and iPad. And I tell you, I have absolutely no guilt whatsoever about how I am binge watching Masterclass videos. Masterclass is online video training, right, by the absolute best creatives in their field. I mean, my favourites have been Aaron Sorkin, Jodie Foster, Shonda Rhimes, but there are so many more in so many fields. Whatever it is you need to learn, or actually whatever it is you just want to learn, the very greatest person you could ever want to be taught by has probably done a masterclass. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And while I might be addicted to it now on my Apple TV 4K, you can also access Masterclass on your iPhone, your iPad, and your Mac, or actually, you can also just listen instead of watching. So it's good commuting company too. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/AppleInsider15. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/AppleInsider15. So masterclass.com and then /AppleInsider digits 1 digit 5 AppleInsider15. And thanks to Masterclass for supporting the Apple Insider Podcast. Okay, I'm amused by that. I want to be clear that I'm not going to knock Brazil for having strong privacy laws, but Brazil getting money out of Apple, this kind of knots that you get into and stuff, it does bring me to the thing that has been driving me spare for, well, off and on, let's be fair, William, for weeks now, which is Indonesia and Apple. Previously on Indonesia, I don't know how Apple got away with this, but for years and years they were selling the iPhone in Indonesia, and even though the country has this rule, a local mandate, sources vary on how much it is, but either 35% or 40% of any device must be sourced locally, and Apple nowhere near that, not even close, not a pixel of that. But Apple got away with it and was allowed to not comply with this and get the certificate anyway, because it put a lot of money into other types of development. It created developer academies. It did all sorts of things there. There's offices in there. It's putting jobs in there in some way. Apple was supposed to be paying about, I think it was 100 million, maybe 110. And for some reason, they didn't. They fell short by about 10 million. Honestly, if you have a good deal, you pay it and you get out of there. You don't try to welsh on that. And it's kind of bitten Apple in the backside, really, because I'm not clear whether this would have happened anyway with certificates having to be renewed. But late last year, these Indonesian certificates had to be renewed. And because Apple had fallen short, Indonesia said, yeah, no. And they banned sales of the iPhone 16. It was on sale for, I think, a couple of weeks, so people do have some and they can still import them, but no reseller can sell them legally. Since then, Apple, I thought this was insulting, actually. Apple offered 10 million to it, and it's like, that's what you should have paid anyway. I felt like a token, and I wasn't surprised when Indonesia said, yeah, you're having a laugh here, we want more. Apple comes back with 100 million. And I could still understand them saying no, but then suddenly the Indonesian government was saying Apple is going to give us $1 billion for manufacturing in the country. And then after they'd said that, they also said, it's like this almost comic timing, beat, and it isn't enough. And the latest thing is that Indonesia is trying to get 3 billion out of Apple. Apple has apparently committed to the billion. It will build a manufacturing plant, and Indonesia doesn't care, it wants more. Now, I need to say Indonesia's logic, just very quickly, is that the factory Apple says it will build AirTags. They can't give Apple a certificate for the iPhone because none of the components for the iPhone will be built at that factory, and that makes sense. But do you know how few iPhones Apple sells in Indonesia? It's 2% of the smartphone market there. What is it going to take for Apple to think this just isn't worth it and pull out completely?
The whole thing smells of government greed a little bit. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about Indonesia or its government, but I think they saw money. Dollar signs went up like a Looney Tunes cartoon, and they decided to try and get as much as they can out of it because Apple's on the global stage, and Apple can't afford bad PR usually, so it's working with it as best as it can. But this back and forth is honestly stupid, and I think the law is a little bit backwards. It makes sense for certain things, right? But Apple's iPhone is kind of an anomaly in the system, not actually like the basis of the system. So to ask for like 40% of components or 40% of revenue to be generated in this country is madness. Yeah. It does not fit the model, and I don't really know what they're looking for. $3 billion is how much Apple paid for Beats Music.
Oh yes,
yes. So I'm and what is Indonesia giving Apple, right? Beats Music gave Apple Dr. Dre, right? At least they got him.
That's true.
Maybe a little bit of little something called Apple Music, and the subscribers that it has that pays it money every month is so how much of an investment can Apple make and have it pay off? Because that is what this is. It's an investment. So will Indonesian people buy enough iPhones to make up for a $3 billion investment? And I guess this is over decades, maybe. I don't know. But how long until they ask for another $3 billion because the iPhone 17 isn't 40% of their whatever, right? it's madness. I feel like this is all going to eventually backfire, and Apple has the power here to just leave and not lose anything for it, because either way they're losing money, so they might as well just cut and run.
I think it's interesting that all of this sort of kicked in after, I think it was April last year. It sounded, I mean, you never know, but the impression I had was that the government had said to Tim Cook, oh, please manufacture in the country, because there was this release saying basically Tim Cook had promised to consider it, which always sounds like a parent and a child relationship, say, well, we'll see, kind of thing. And they obviously didn't wait to see what was happening, but actually, even though 40% of components in an iPhone seems impossible to me, they're like global things. But in Indonesia's defense, Huawei, I'm never sure I'm pronouncing or spelling that right, they're about to release a whole series of phones, 10 of them in March, 30 phones and tablets by the end of the year, and presumably they are managing the 40%. So it's Huawei. Physically possible. Thank you.
Well, Huawei, the problem with them is they're like Samsung and probably have like 40 different devices on the market. So they can just choose 6 of them to build in Indonesia and no one would blink an eye, because they're probably selling in volume. If you ever look at the charts of smartphone shipments for the year, Apple is competing usually with Samsung, Huawei, Xiaomi. And then you look at this situation in Indonesia, and Huawei can just be like, okay, here, take these low volume phones. We make, 50 million of them, and your country has enough manufacturing to build them. So yeah, just build these. We'll sell them to you. We'll sell them around the world, and we'll continue to be able to do business in your market because we have so many devices. But Apple only has 10 iPhones-ish for sale at a time. I think I'm being generous, maybe 6 iPhones at a time. And all of them are incredible volumes. So 40% of any phone, even the iPhone 15, a year old, 40% of that volume would just, like the entire country would have to become an iPhone factory. It just doesn't work.
No, I believe that it was actually in any one phone, 40% of the components must be sourced locally. And given how few they sell, that's probably not that many processors, displays, or whatever it is. But just physically, given that the components come from all over the world at the moment, relocating them all to Indonesia, creating all of those factories.
To take it another direction, what is Indonesia offering Apple? Do they have the plants to make the processors that TSMC,
No.
Do they have the glass manufacturing? Do they have what India is doing? What do they have to offer? Can they build 40% of the components? What are they going to build? The frame of the phone? I don't even know if they could manufacture that. So what are they offering Apple? Again, this is my own ignorance speaking. I don't even know what parts of phones Indonesia is capable of building. They probably have entire factories like you would find in Vietnam or South Korea. But this is still the question of, are they good enough to meet Apple's standards? And if they're this is a point of privilege. I get it. Apple's devices are premium, and maybe Apple turning their nose up at Indonesian business to say, yeah, you're not good enough. Well, it's just, where are they coming from to say, well, actually, in order for you to sell your premium smartphone here, you need to do business with us, and they're just not as good. It'd be different if they were able to compete on an equal level with TSMC or these other manufacturers, but they just aren't. I mean, Indonesia, I've only heard through these kinds of discussions at that. I'm not sure how much of Apple is there. I'm sure they have some factories there because Apple has factories everywhere. It's just, I don't know. It seems like their demands are way out of scope. It doesn't make sense.
Actually, I can tell you, Apple has no manufacturing in Indonesia at all. It does have office space there, does have developer centres, and it's talking about an R&D centre. I'm not clear if it's got any R&D at the moment there, but there's no manufacturing. That doesn't mean the country doesn't have other abilities to manufacture, but at the moment...
I mean, Apple should have business there. Apple should have business around the world. I don't think iPhone should be withheld from a country or whatever. Like, it's silly. It's just, all right, let's turn it around. In the United States, if everything sold on Temu had to have 40% production in the United States, would Temu exist? Right? It's just half of what is bought in the United States is sourced almost 100% from China, right? And we're one of the most hi-ho America, patriotic people on the planet. And we don't even require these kinds of things to happen in order to do business in our country. We have free trade, open trade borders, or whatever you want to say. What does Indonesia think they're going to gain by forcing companies to build there? I get it. Maybe they want a industrialization effort. There's just a lot of questions here, and so I don't think we're making any good progress in this conversation. It's just it's so confusing, and I hope they figure it out. I hope they come up with something here, because I just don't understand. I hate it for the people, because this feels like a government thing and not a people thing.
Yeah. I mean, the deep-rooted question is, how does Indonesia have apple over a barrel? And we may never know about this. But without question, we will hear more about Indonesia. I think in the last headline I wrote, I used the word again. And you could feel, they want more money for it. But so we will come back to this, I'm sure. But maybe it'll all be happily resolved, I don't know, in the next week. Let's be optimistic about this. And I really didn't mean to make this quite the segue I'm going to now, but speaking about a week and schedules and things, you mentioned earlier about code being found in the iOS release. Well, there is another code to do with an app that may be called Invites, that Apple may release an Invites app. And I loathe the word Invites. Is it really hard to say invitation? But okay. Is this something as well that you know about how much code there is and how likely this is to be in there? Because I've only seen the headlines.
Apple seems to be working on a specific app that would allow users to invite people, have them say whether they were coming or not, and it would show in the UI that they said yes, maybe, no. And this would basically coincide with calendar systems. So it seems to be an add-on, and there's no way of knowing what this is. It could be an iMessage app, which honestly makes the most sense. To have an iMessage app where you send out an invitation to a group chat or multiple people, and have it kind of reflect who says yes or no for the other users. I don't know. I like apps. I want more apps from Apple. I like the idea of this because honestly, the invitation system in Calendar is archaic and terrible, because you just go in there and have to type in a name and then attach it, and it just kind of like generates this old school, I guess, ICS invite file thing and sends it out. It's utter garbage. I don't know. It's kind of like email to me. I feel like a lot of this stuff is built on old systems, and we need to really rethink it. So for me, what I would like to see from an app like this is, if it's standalone, have it integrate with your calendar, have it know if you're available or not. Like if you're invited to something, have it tell you you're available for this, right? Check the calendar and like have it be interactive in that way. Let people join in, or like if you're, I don't know, is it like, how far is Apple willing to take this? Is this going to be like reminders where you can assign tasks to people? So if you invite them and they say yes, then you can say, okay, you're bringing chips, right? Like I wonder what the idea is, or is this going to be bare bones? Which if it is, what's the point of it being an app? Like, I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. Maybe Invites is a UI paradigm on top of Calendar, and it's just a modal, right? And it's who knows? We don't know anything. It's that this app exists. It showed up in 18.2, then disappeared. Now it's back in 18.3. It was not mentioned at WWDC, so there's a good chance this app is being worked on and won't even be announced or released in the 18 cycle. It may be something in the 19 cycle. We'll just have to wait and see.
Do you know, you may have slightly changed my mind here. As soon as you said that it could be part of messages, that makes sense to me. I could see that being part of messages, whereas I can't see it being an app on its own. It's like, because invitations are so much a part of calendars, and actually you may have also talked to me into staying with Fantastical, because inviting people seems easier than you described with calendar there. It's like if a to-do app kept all of your Monday tasks in a separate app. I mean, I can't see a clean division between it all. So I was highly doubtful, but now I'm lowly doubtful, shall we say.
Apple...
Do you know,
Go ahead.
after you. I was just thinking, you convinced me of anything. You could sell me things. Now, what about those shoes you were mentioning, the Air Jordans? Talk me into those.
Overpriced. I will say that I don't know. Apple continues to do this song and dance of we're not going to create a social network. Here's more social features for your device. I am still so hopeful that, especially after this week's news, and maybe I'll write something, maybe we'll discuss it in a future episode, but I think even now more than ever, and every time I say this, it's true, but it's just more true every time, we so need a private, safe, secure, quote-unquote social network. We need to redefine what social networks are. I don't think I think social media might be dead. This is the nail in the coffin after what happened with Meta this week. It might actually just be bad. I mean, it's always been bad, but like it's just we don't need to be there anymore. Blue Sky and Mastodon have their niches, and people are there, and there's more people on Blue Sky, and a lot of like famous people and influencers and even brands are joining Blue Sky, and but the rate has slowed. And it's a question of, will Blue Sky actually be the thing? We don't know. And I am still hopeful that maybe in this death of social media, we'll get a little bit of a rebirth in micro-social ecosystems where Apple controls this central element of iMessage and contacts and calendars and invites and notes and reminders and all these shared details and brings it together into this kind of micro network of your loved ones, your people you're close to. Call it circles. That's a callback to the very much failed and awful Google social network. But I do believe if Apple doesn't even have to call it a social network, just keep innovating in these ways to allow us to be social. In the last few months, and I guess the last few years now, I've relied heavily on group chats with various people, either friends, family, whatever, separate group chats for everything. And that's where we share our photos and our plans and information, and we like them and create threads with them. Imagine that just more centralized, invite-based, and not global. And Apple is 90% of the way there, and every day they seem to inch closer to it. And I still wonder if they're going to get there or not. And this invites thing is, again, just a weird little thing of it feels social. Like, what if it was for planning work-related tasks and like party planning and personal events, and you get to create these use AI image generation to create invite cards with everyone on it or something, like, and you save them to a folder. I don't know, like it becomes social in that way.
This week with Meta, I mean, the thing with Meta this week is that they're just abandoning fact-checking. They've fired fact-checkers and all this stuff. And we also learned that previously, if you paid them enough money to advertise them, they didn't really look too closely at what you were doing anyway. So, all this good. And I have friends who are leaving Facebook. Loads of friends have left Twitter. I feel like the town is deserting everywhere. And I've wondered if we will look back on this time as 2008 or so to now as being the social media period. But on the positive, I mean, there's so much to dislike about social media, but not this weekend coming, but next weekend I'm going to be in Ireland, and I will be meeting a guy I would tell you is a friend, and I have never met him, but we've known each other because of Twitter since about 2009 or 10 or so, and I would never have got to know somebody I really like. So social media has a benefit, and I would hope that it will continue. I don't see Apple doing it. Or, I mean, you can see them trying, but not succeeding, because I know people who are so vehemently anti-Apple that they wouldn't touch it, and there's enough of them that it would be a siloed kind of thing.
Yeah, there's ways that you can make this interplay. Let me give a brief example. I don't know the name of this app. I forgot, but here's what it does, and this is something Apple could do. This is something that could be open source. So you have a contacts app with a database of people. And let's say you're traveling somewhere and you have it in your calendar that you're traveling there, and someone else says in your contacts list that they're going to travel in their calendar. And then there's this back-end system that matches saying, hey, you're both going to be in the same area at the same time. The only way this handshake happens, is if you're mutuals, you're both in each other's contacts, and you've both said you're going to be in the same place at the same time, and it does a handshake and says, hey, you're going to be in the same place at the same time. That app exists now. I forget what it's called, but it's the same idea I've been talking about of these micro social networks. It's only if you know the person. It's only if you're good enough with the person to have them in your contacts list in the first place, and it allows you to organize in-person meetings easier. I could see Apple integrating this with their Find My system and whatnot, but it's just little things like that are so cool, and I love that people are coming up with these ideas, and it just feels so Apple-y. But funny enough, you say you're worried about silos, but if we continue getting better at widening the basically like RCS, making chat a little bit more accessible across ecosystems, I could imagine Apple's quote-unquote social network allowing at least some tenuous connection from Android users, that because they do exist. I don't really know anyone in my life that uses Android, weirdly enough. I don't know why that's the case. That's just how it worked out. But they do exist, and I think Apple, especially if they're considering quote-unquote social, I would hope that they consider that. I know in the past they haven't, but that's for ecosystem reasons. I think if they pursue this kind of platform, it would be for a different reason. And that's why, again, it shouldn't be called a social network. But I'm with you. Psychologists and people who study humanity in general have always said we will one day look back and see social networks as this barbaric thing that we exposed ourselves to, that we as a human species just have no bearing on it, right? I love the joke of we're trying to digest all of the world's information on a daily basis through an infinitely scrolling social media feed, trying to show you ads for toothpaste, using a brain designed to mash rocks together, create fire, and eat food, right? Like, it's a complete difference from where we came from as a species to what we are today. And all of this exposure creates anxiety and pressures that we were never meant to have. And social media is a huge part of that, and maybe its death is a good thing.
So, Wes, where can people find you on social media?
As I see, and that's the funny thing. As bad as it can be, it can also be great, because if you use it in moderation, it is nice. And I've noticed lately, I have not been a completionist, which is good. I'm happy about that, and I'm going to continue doing that. I'm on these platforms still, but I'm just using them less. I'm trying to follow people more specifically. It's so weird. I don't know what's happening with the world, but on the bright side, I am on Blue Sky. You can find me there. Hilly Tech is always hilly.tech there, but if you search it, I will pop up. You can still @ me on Mastodon. I'll see it. I'll respond, but I'm not really active there these days. Blue Sky seems to be the thing right now where just people are and they're talking, especially with these fires going on. It's a good way to stay up to date on information and see how things are going on. But you can also email me. I've gotten some good emails. And we didn't get any reviews this week, but you can leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app, and we will talk about it on the show.
Well, in that case, I should say that I'm off to give us some fake reviews. Obviously, that's how social media works. But while I'm doing that, I can also be reached on Blue Sky as W Gallagher, and I'm on YouTube as 58 Keys. I think it's been a bit of a roller coaster episode there, but let's just say that's it for this edition of the Apple Insider Podcast, unless you're a subscriber, in which case just you hang on right there one moment, please, because you'll be hearing the extended Apple Insider Plus in moments. And if you're not a subscriber, it would be such a treat to have you. Check out our show notes for how to join us, would you? Okay? And in the meantime, though, thank you for listening. Thanks as well to our sponsors, Oracle and Masterclass.
And we'll talk next week.